everyone, and welcome back to SPL Book Talks. This week, we are specifically centering our conversation around the holiday coming up this next week, Juneteenth, which is a really important holiday that I personally believe that everybody in the United States should know something about. Just a little bit about the holiday, if you don't know anything about it. Juneteenth itself is a shorthand version of June 19th. June 19th marks the day when federal troops arrived in Galveston, Texas in 1865 after the Emancipation Proclamation was signed. But here's the thing, it was in 1865. So that was 2 years, 2 full years after the Emancipation Proclamation had been signed. And the reason that they were doing this was to make sure that all of the enslaved people of the United States were actually freed. Because a lot of Southern states weren't following the Emancipation Proclamation that Lincoln had, given his speech on that. I feel like we all know that history, of the Emancipation Proclamation. So Juneteenth is like, how to put this? So generally speaking, and this is coming from a white person, which I do want to acknowledge right now. This history is coming from a white person. So like, if you want more in-depth version of this history or more authentic version, definitely go seek out the information from Black people of the United States, people of color in general, but specifically maybe even people who had ancestry in slavery and all of that sort of thing. But Juneteenth is the official end of slavery and a lot of African-American and Black people's views in the United States. So this is also considered the longest running African-American holiday in the United States too. And recently, a lot of places are actually considering this a federal holiday, which is amazing. And more places should do that. I think it's like going on a state by state basis now. I'm pretty sure New York State recognizes it as a holiday, like an official holiday. Which is good. Okay. Specifically, the situation in Texas that made it so that troops had to enforce the actual Emancipation Proclamation, I guess. And there were other laws that were floating around about slavery at that time too that were in effect by this. But what really sticks is that the U.S. General Gordon Granger stood on Texas soil and read General Orders Number 3. The people of Texas are informed that in accordance with a proclamation from the Executive of the United States, all slaves are free. So this law, the Emancipation Proclamation by Lincoln, was actually being enforced in all states.
So now isn't it
it's
considered...
a long history.
Oh, so sorry. Now isn't it considered the, there's they call it several different names.
Yes.
Jubilation Day, or Jubilee
Liberation Day, Emancipation Day, yeah.
Emancipation Day. So I think it really just celebrates the end of slavery, basically. I mean,
yes, definitely. And, a lot of people consider the Emancipation Proclamation reading day that Lincoln did that as the official
right
day that ended slavery, but that is not how it is viewed by most African-American populations of the United States, because slavery was still happening for right. At least a full right. 2 years, like it said, after the Emancipation Proclamation was. Everybody should do their own research on Juneteenth, and I guess that's sort of what we're here for today, is to help you get started a little bit, give you some things to read, things to think about, stuff like that about Juneteenth and Black authors and, Black voices that we should be raising and celebrating. So I think we're going to start first with Mr. Michael Morin, our infamous, wonderful children's librarian.
So I have a couple children's books, but really adults can read them too. The thing I'm finding is there's some wonderful picture books that we have down that have lots of information. If you don't want, I mean, you should read the books that Colleen and Maria are going to suggest, but if you want a quick fix, we have some wonderful books with wonderful illustrations. I unfortunately didn't have a book on Juneteenth, but it's been a continuing struggle ever since. Like she said, the Emancipation Proclamation started, but it took 2 more years for slaves to be free. And then it's taken so many more years for them to be treated as equals. And so that's what the 2 books I have are about being treated as equals. The first one I'm going to talk about is called Someday Is Now. And it's quite the story. It's an inspirational true story of a civil rights pioneer. And it's about Clara Luper. And Clara she was born in 1923 and lived till 2011. And she, of course, grew up in the segregated Oklahoma. And she decided that the only way she was going to be able to make a difference was become a teacher. And so one of the things she said to her kids was, you can't come in and sit there on your constitutional right. You make your changes in the world. And that's what she was planning to do. And so they keep talking about, she wrote a play for her kids to perform, and they were ages 6 to 17, and the play was called Brother President. Well, the NAACP got involved. They heard about this play and invited her on a tour, the kids and her on a tour, and they went to New York City, and they saw that whites and blacks actually ate together and shopped together and were treated as equals together. So, and then they talked about going to the Arlington National Cemetery and the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. And she said, again, all of these people died for our freedom. We need to really, or she didn't, but one of the kids said, we really need to get busy and do something for our country. So it talks about one of the first sit-ins at Kat's drugstore. And she taught the kids 4 things: investigation, negotiation, education, and demonstration. So they did their research, and then they tried to speak to the white owners of the shops and restaurants, and they tried to negotiate with them. But of course, they insisted, no, just whites only in Oklahoma. So finally, they decided that someday was now, and they did a sit-in. I can't believe she did this with students, 6 to 17-year-olds. They went in, and of course, it was ugly. But the kids had brought their books. They sat, and they had asked for Cokes to drink so they could have a Coke to drink while they did their studies. And they sat there and studied, and people were mean. The white people were mean and nasty, and it was ugly. Well, the kids didn't give up. The kids wanted to go back, and they had more friends, and they went back, and it continued for 2 weeks. And finally, Kat's drugstores, not only in Oklahoma, but in Kansas and, there it is, in Missouri, Kansas, Iowa, and Oklahoma, would now serve all people of every race. So she was like the first pioneer. It took that. And then they decided to go to the next place, the marketplace. So, and then at the very end, it's nice. They have a thing about Clara, a glossary of words, steps of nonviolent resistance. And it's just a really well done book. And I forgot to mention the authors. Forgive me out there if whoever hears their name said wrong, I apologize. Oleg Bamisola Rudy Perkovich. She is the author of 8th Grade Super Zero, a notable book for a global society, as well as notable social studies trade book for young people. She is co-author of the NAACP Image Award nominated 2 Naomis and the sequel, Naomi's 2, and is the editor of The Hero Next Door. Okay, so she's she has written a lot of books, especially along with the NAACP. The illustrator, she is from New Orleans. She's a children's illustrated and educator, and she has won many art awards as well. So they are both ladies of color. So that is the book called Someday Is Now. And I think that really, it applies now as well. There are things that need to be changed, and she knew how to change them. I'm just amazed. It's at the subtitle of this is Clara Luper and the 1958 Oklahoma City sit-ins. So those were very brave kids and a brave teacher. And it's just an amazing story.
That's awesome. I love that.
Another amazing story is this guy. Again, the highest tribute. Thurgood Marshall's life, leadership, and legacy. He ended up being the first Black judge for the Supreme Court. He lived from 1908 to 1993. And I better talk about, again, this is written by Kelka Magoon and illustrated by Laura Freeman. Again, both ladies of color. Again, Kelka Magoon has received NAACP Image Awards. And actually, Laura Freeman has also been recognized with an NAACP Image Award. Okay, back to Thurgood. He actually started out as Thoroughgood was his name. And he decided one day, he's going to change that. And from now on, he was known as Thurgood Marshall. And that's the way he sort of handled his life. He would change things. He, of course, again, being born in 1908, definitely grew up. He grew up in Baltimore, Maryland. So again, a segregated city. And they talked a lot about, at his family table, the different boundaries the country had set. But like, I thought one of the interesting things they talk about is one of the teachers he got into trouble. He wasn't just a straight A student always through school. He got into trouble. So one of his teachers assigned him to read the Constitution of the United States as punishment. The plan backfired. Thurgood loved reading about the law. The nation's Constitution says all people are equal. So how can segregation laws treat people differently? Thurgood wondered. And again, it's great illustrations. In the back, she's put "We the People," the Constitution. And they talked, he wanted to attend, segregation meant he had to attend a Black college. So he went to Lincoln University in Pennsylvania, and joined a debate team, which proved very important later when he becomes a lawyer and argues some different laws. But even though he had gone to Lincoln University, he still thought it was unfair that he was being forced to going to certain school. And actually, one of the things that happened was originally only their debate team could debate other Black teams. They couldn't debate white teams. Well, they got it changed. In 1928, they finally debated the Pennsylvania State College white team in an interracial debate. So they helped change that. He started way back in college. Then he wanted to go, wait a minute, I got it here. I thought I had it. He wanted to go to Howard. I'm getting this wrong. He wanted to go to University of Maryland, but again, did not admit Black students. So he went to Howard University Law School in Washington, which is, to me nowadays, that's the big school to go to anyway. People go to Howard University. I'm not sure people go to University of Maryland anymore for law. I'm sure they do, but who knows? But anyway, again, he was frustrated that he had to go to a different school than he wanted, but he made the best of it. Again, joined debate team, did very well. He started working with a professor for the NAACP in New York. And he actually took over as the lead attorney for that group for a while. and he continued to argue cases before the Supreme Court. Then in 1961, President John F. Kennedy asked him to become a judge on the judge circuit. And then finally, President Johnson nominated him for a seat on the Supreme Court. And of course, a lot of people didn't want him to be there, but he stood his ground. And on October 2nd, 1967, he became the first Black man on the Supreme Court, which was an amazing thing. And again, he continued to argue. You know, he spoke very well all the time, and he continued to argue the courts. He didn't always win, but he kept trying to make a difference. And again, it shows in the book a timeline of his did. They talk about his two wives. His first wife passed away, but both of his wives were very important in his life, and made a difference. And then at the end, it talks about the major court cases. So again, two important people, Thurgood Marshall and Clara Luper, in the development of Black rights, or the improvement of Black rights, I should say. And we actually have a couple other books down there as well. Again, just short little blurbs that are easy reads, but great for kids and great for adults too.
Yeah,
I've said it before. Oh, sorry.
No, sorry. I was just going to say, it's great because they're kids' books, but they give you so much information. I mean, if you don't know all of the details, I mean, there's so much in that little, it's a good like summation of everything that in his life that was so important, or both of their lives that was so important. So yeah, kids' books, awesome.
Yeah, I was just about to say, I've said it before, and I will say it again, and I will say it till the day I die. I love children's books. I love them so much. And one of the reasons why I do is because they do these things so well, of like making general knowledge accessible to anybody.
Yeah.
Like literally anybody. You can pick up that book and you can understand what it's saying to you. And it's amazing. And also, like, another thing that I've talked about before, but the fact that these sort of books are coming out now and they are accessible to anybody is incredible, because for years, like, I'm not even sure I knew who Clara Luper. I've never heard that name before. That is and I've been through college history classes, and I have not heard that name before.
And it's a name that should be known.
I'm not sure.
Exactly.
I don't think I knew her name, but I remember that. I don't remember it, but I know of that incident with Kat's Drugstore. And so, but now it's good to get her name out. Yeah. And it's just good to get her name out there as who it was that really made a change.
Right.
That was amazing.
And also, I feel like with Thurgood Marshall, I knew who that was. And I feel like that's a big name and we know who that is. But I love that book talks about his roots. Mm-hmm. Because like, that's not something I think I knew. Like, even in high school classes, like, we would just hear his name in passing and that was it. And then I learned more about him in one of my American history classes at school. But like, I love children's books. I love them so much.
Yeah. Shows how much you can learn from them. You can learn so much from them. They're so, I think because they're so concise, and obviously that Thurgood Marshall one, I mean, the whole timeline, I mean, I'm sure I would read it and learn things that I don't know, that I didn't know about him, that I, just never learned. I mean, his name he's always been there. He was judged through most of my life, but I didn't, know much about him. So that's wonderful. Really cool.
Yeah. Amazing. And we have, and like I almost said dad. I'm going to say it anyway. Like my dad said, because if y'all haven't figured out, Michael is my dad. There are so many other wonderful books that we have like this downstairs of just more diverse voices in storytelling. And that's what I live for, like telling the stories of people who have been shunted off in the past, So it's amazing. I love this. I love this so much.
Definitely. So that's a good lead in to the book that I'm going to talk about today. So the author is Zora Neale Hurston, who, if you don't know who she is, she was a pretty incredible lady from the early 1900s. She was actually born in 1891, I think. But most of her life, she always said that she was born in 1900. Let's see, would be 10 years later, whatever that was, 1901, right? But it came from, it wasn't just about, like women, we want to sound like we're younger. It came from the fact that when she was 26 years old, she still hadn't finished high school. And in order to go to public school, you had to be the right age. And so she fixed her birth date so she was 10 years younger, and so she could finish high school. And then she went on, and she was a graduate of Howard University, and then she later went to Barnard. So she was a very well-educated Black woman from her time period that a lot of, as we were talking about, people of color were not as accepted in those universities, except for maybe Howard. But anyway, she was a writer. She wrote a lot. She's written a lot of things, and her most famous one is Eyes Are Watching God. That's her most famous one. I personally have never read it, which I really regret. So I'm going to have to read that. But it's supposed to be wonderful. But this book that I'm going to talk about is Hitting a Straight Lick with a Crooked Stick. That's a funny title, I think. But this is a collection of stories that she wrote early on. I'll just read a little bit of the intro in the beginning so you understand. It's an outstanding collection of stories that flash with Hurston's biting satiric humor as they share revelations about love, migration, gender, class, racism, and sexism that proudly reflect African-American folk culture. So it's, and it all happens, a lot of these are happening in different places, but they talk about the Harlem Renaissance a lot in it. And she grew up in a place also, Eatonville, Florida, which was basically a Black community. And so she was surrounded by all this Black achievement, everywhere. And so I think that just, affirmed that, anybody can do anything. But then, like I said, the problem was that when her mom died early in her life, and that kind of ruined her progression at that point. And that's how she ended up not finishing school, but then later went back and did it. So, but anyway, so the stories there's so many in here, and I've not read them all. I read through a couple of them, but they really give the feel of the time period and the culture and the where people were coming from at that point. The title, which I think it sounds kind of funny, hitting a straight lick with a crooked stick. It's a Southern dialect saying, which means to reach an end result through an unexpected or contorted method is kind of what they say. That's what that means. So she's got some beautiful stories. Some of the writing is really beautiful in it. There's one, the first one, John Redding Goes to Sea. Like, this is just a quote from the part of the story. Springtime in Florida is not a matter of peeping violets or bursting buds merely. It is a riot of color in nature, glistening green leaves, pink, blue, purple, yellow blossoms that fairly stagger the visitors from the north. The mikes of hyacinth are like an undulating carpet on the surface of the river. The nights are white nights as the moon shines with dazzling splendor. So it has just like some very beautiful writing in there. I mean, obviously that's her. That's, the way she wrote. So it's just beautiful. And I would encourage anyone to read these because you're going to get that feel and flavor of that time period in the African-American, culture. and that's what's kind of wonderful about it. So you get a peek into that culture and the stories that they were, telling and going through in their lives. So that's why I chose this one. The foreword that is by Tayari Jones, and it's edited by Genevieve West. And there's a lot of introduction, many pages of introduction and context of what's going on in the stories and stuff. So this is in our library. This is a fairly new book. It was released in January or February of 2020. So it's still pretty new. So I encourage you all to come in and check it out. So
I love Zora Neale Hurston. I love her so much. Like you were talking about, you were talking about you haven't read Their Eyes Were Watching God, which and you said you should, and I agree you should, because it's amazing. But
I know everyone's told me that.
That's just the way she writes.
Yeah.
Like she makes everything so like you can taste it. Mm-hmm. Like, so you can smell what she's writing about, you can taste what she's writing about. And what's really interesting and what made me think of it is the hitting a straight lick with a crooked stick, the Southern dialect and the language of Black culture in general is amazing. If you look at their own languages linguistically, it's awesome.
And there's a lot of that in here. I mean, I don't want to read it because I won't read it. I won't read it correct. In my head, I can read it, but I don't want to read it out loud and sound like I'm trying to, I don't know.
Well, and that's
culture, but it's beautiful, but it's kind of cool. It's beautiful in an interesting way.
That's what I was going to get to is I haven't read this particular publication yet. But like Their Eyes Were Watching God is all written in Southern Black dialect. And it's amazing. Like it's just incredible. And is one of the things that makes you think about, like, we all speak in different ways. And the notion for a really long time that Southern Black dialect made them somehow like, and this is still a thing, like, take for example, like a Black news reporter who might talk a little differently, but then when they're there, they're talking very straight and narrow. They have to talk a certain way because otherwise they won't be seen as professional. And Zora Neale Hurston, I feel like, was one of the first that I can think of that kind of started to break that of like, we all talk differently. Why are we judging people based on different dialects and different accents and all of that sort of thing? So it's really interesting, and it's awesome to know that she also includes that in a bunch of the stories that are in. That one's been on my list for a really long time, and I just haven't read it yet. But
most of the dialect in a lot of them is that way, and it's great. It is like a different language, I think. And there's a beauty and an interesting, I don't know, flavor to it that I like. I love that. So thought it was really cool.
Yeah.
So
I think, I think I'm bringing us to a close.
Yeah.
I'm talking about a book called Homegoing by Yagi Yasi. This is a new-ish book. It was released in 2017, so it's a little older, but it is new enough that you would be like, oh my gosh, they're teaching that in high school classes, but they are already. Like, that's how prominent this book is. And it's not nonfiction. It is a fictional telling of two sisters who were separated from their homeland in Ghana. And one was sold into slavery and one wasn't. And it follows their parallel lives basically throughout their lives. And even after them, it follows the stories of the families for 8 generations and all the way up to the civil rights movement in the United States. I think both of the sisters ended up in the United States anyway, but like I said, one was sold into slavery and one wasn't. So just a little bit about Yagyasi, just really quick. So Yagyasi was originally born in Ghana, but she and her family moved to Huntsville, Alabama. So like, imagine for a second being a small Black woman, like Black girl in Alabama. And so she grew up in Huntsville, and then she went on to go to Stanford University for her bachelor's degree in English, which awesome, amazing, incredible. And then she went to the University of Iowa to do her master's in fine arts in writing. So she is an incredible human being. She has also, she won the National Book Critics Circle Award for Best First Book for Homegoing for this book. Also, I do want to say this book was published when she was 26 years old. So she's 32 now, but that book was published when she was 26, which is, again, incredible human being, so much drive. And she has also won the National Book Foundation's 5 Under 35 honors and the American Book Award. So she's been awarded all sorts of things. And like I said, there are like places and high schools that are teaching this book now.
What's the name of the book again, please?
Homegoing.
Homegoing, okay.
Homegoing, yeah. Just to get into it a little bit. The two sisters, one is named Effia and the other is named Essie or Essie. I'm not really sure. I think it's probably Essie based on my knowledge of African languages, because I have a little bit of that. So Effia is, she turns 12, and the chief of her village decides to marry her off to a British soldier, basically. And that's how she ends up in America, because they end up going there, and she lives her life as well-to-do, like one of the first well-to-do Black women in like the United States. And again, this is fictional, so it's sort of like that like universe. And she and her husband, James Collins is his name, they, develop sincere feelings for each other, and they move into like this castle that's in the United States. But she quickly realizes that there are women in the dungeons of the castle who are being traded for slavery. And she also learns that her father is dying, and all of this, we don't actually know that she has a sister yet, by the way, because they were separated like very young. So Essie is trapped in the woman's dungeon in the castle, and she is being traded away for slavery. And of course, there's, this book doesn't hold back on the truths of slavery and the mass sexual assaults, the just in general complete disregard for humanity that the soldiers showed the people who were being traded. And of course, as when they get to the United States to be slaves, it doesn't hold back on that. But the other cool thing is each of the sisters were given, when they were little, a black stone pendant that they have. So that's how they eventually figure out who each other is. And they do end up meeting, and they both have their black pendants, and they're like, what? So anyway, and after it follows their storyline, it follows Ness, Essie's daughter, who is working on one of a more famous plantation in Alabama. She doesn't speak to the other people a lot, but it kind of just goes through her story, and then it goes to it's the family tree of this story and keeping track of, you know, the sheer lineage of leading from slavery to like the civil rights movement is incredible. And there are people to this day who so of course there are, that trace their lineage all the way back to slavery through generations and generations. You know, after Ness's story, it follows Ness's son, and he goes back to Africa for a little while, but then he comes back and he ends up working on ships in Baltimore. And because he and his mother escaped slavery. It's really interesting because after a little while, he became really worried that he was going to be re-enslaved. And the way that Yag Yassi writes it is that his daughter's wedding is literally on the day that the Fugitive Slave Act is passed. So it just further cements the thought process of what happens if, like, my whole family is going to be taken down with me because I was able to escape. And that's sort of how the Fugitive Slave Act works. You know, if there's a person who was previously enslaved found in the northern United States, they had to be returned to their owners, in their masters in the southern United States. It's hard to describe, like the complexity and the language that Yassi uses and because she writes beautifully, and it's an amazing book and everybody should read it. And I know I say that every time I recommend a book on here, but it's really like, if you want a book that covers the history of slavery to the Civil Rights Act through the family lens and not just through like the regular historical lens that we get it from, like, you have to check out this book. It's awesome. Also, I will say, so we don't have this book in our library, but we do have it in the system. They have it at Norwich. They have it at most of the libraries around. And they have it both in regular book form and ebook form. So you can get it either way. Yeah. So an amazing, amazing book.
Sounds pretty epic. It sounds like such a giant story, obviously, because it's many stories of down through the
immense. That was the word I was looking for. The sheer immenseness of the story and the topic. Yeah.
Sounds pretty awesome. It really does sound really good. I love stuff like that when you do generations and you get the lineage. I love that.
Me too.
Cool. So that would be a good way to read it, because it would really be a cool thing to read because of all the history in it.
That's why I was really interested in it, because
like historical fiction, because
yes, exactly.
It's part in history, but it's not really real people that were there. But I love that. So
me too.
Awesome. Well, this has been super great, and hopefully we've suggested some things that you might want to check out on your own. As we said, all of these are available to get, at least through the Sherburne Public Library. If we don't have it, we can get it for you. So next week, we're going to be celebrating Pride, because June is Pride Month, and so we'll be doing a book talk on Pride and LGBTQ authors, and so it should be fun. That'll be a lot of fun. So thanks for listening today. We appreciate you all being here, and we hope that you will come see us at the library. And we have a book sale going on this week, so come check us out. So
go get the books.
Right.
50 cents a piece.
That's right. It's a good price. All right. Take care, and thanks for checking us out. See you later.